joining us tonight. My name is Dion Yehudi, and I am the proud principal of Newport High School. We are so glad to have all of you with us this evening. I get the pleasure of opening the evening and introducing your keynote speaker for tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ivan Duran. Dr. Duran is the superintendent of the Bellevue Public School District, and he joined us late this summer in July. Before he arrived here, he was the deputy superintendent of the Dallas Independent School District in Texas, a district that serves approximately 160,000 students. He has also served as assistant superintendent for elementary education in the Denver Public Schools in Colorado, as a principal supervisor, a director of instructional technology, a principal, an assistant principal, and a teacher, all at public schools in Colorado. Dr. Duran holds a doctorate in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Denver and received a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the University of Colorado. His bachelor's degree in education was in the elementary education field with a doctoral focus on leadership in 2 different groups of turnaround schools and the practices that impacted student learning and their outcomes. It is my pleasure to introduce to you an avid runner, a cyclist, a fisherman, and a cook. He and his wife share a passion for promoting equity in education, exploring the great outdoors, and keeping up with their pup, Gracie. Please help me welcome Dr. Ivan Duran, superintendent.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's great to be here. We're excited to have this opportunity. I was at the event last night at Sammamish High School, and I know you guys are in for a real treat. How's that? Is that good? All right, thank you. I know many of the families I talked to last night talked about, NCAA requirements and how do you fill out all the federal forms for financial aid and learning more about some of the universities and colleges here in Washington. So I think you're in for a real treat tonight. I'd love just to know who's here, so I'm going to run through the high schools here. And so when I call out the school, if you're from that school, either parent or student, you get a little bit of a shout out. So let's start first. Is anybody here from Bellevue High School? All right, there you go. I hear a woot over here from people. How about Interlake High School? There we go. International High School. Sammamish High School. All right, very good. Still some here tonight. There was quite a few last night. How about Big Picture? Hey, Big Picture! And then finally for the home school, home court, Newport High School. So we got great representation. I also want to just, I think Deb Kraft, I don't know if she may have slipped out, but she was over here on the side for a second, but really just want to acknowledge and thank her for her work. Part of her work has been organizing this with her teams. And in addition, this week is National Counselors Week. And so we have been recognizing our counselors for all the work that they do, because here in Bellevue, we know and believe in our counselors and know that their work is so important because they help our students both at the academic level, but also at that social emotional level, because we believe that our students need to be well-rounded, our students need to be able to have the opportunity to both grow developmentally at the academic level, but also just at that personal level. So our counselors do a lot of work. So if you see any counselors this week, students, make sure you give them extra thanks, because there's a lot of work that they do to support us in our efforts. And then just a little bit more of my background, just a little more context. I think part of why they asked me to be the keynote tonight is that I'm new to the district, been here now for a little over 7 months, but an opportunity for you to get to know me. I'll share a little bit about my background and my college experience. I'm going to talk a little bit around just Bellevue today, because I really think it's valuable to understand our demographics, and I'll spend some time talking around some of the successes and how we prepare our students. And I'll close part of the presentation just talking about resiliency. So I'm going to grab the clicker here. As the principal stated, I was Oh, I don't have PowerPoint here. I'm not sure what I need to do for that. So if we can get some technical support for the PowerPoint, that would be great. Pull it back up, and while that's coming up, I was most recently in Dallas Independent School District. It was a very large district, 160,000 students. Previously, I was in Denver, Colorado. And when the opportunity for Bellevue came up for me, I was very excited because Bellevue is a district that has had some really amazing success. You know, we've done a lot of things for our students. It has a historical success that I think is something that we can definitely build upon. But in addition, Bellevue also has some challenges. There's some issues around all of our students and how they're achieving. As part of the data you'll see today, you will see that not all of our students are achieving and reaching the outcomes that we would want for every student. So I believe there's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to ensure that we live up to our mission and ensure that every student does find success. Another just personal level for you guys to know that what attracted me to Bellevue also was not only professional work, but many of you know that I'm from Colorado originally, and in Colorado we have a lot of mountains. There are no mountains in Texas, and it took me about a year's time to understand how important nature was to me, so I feel very blessed to be back in a place where there's a lot of mountains, a lot of nature, and the addition of water has just been a really wonderful thing. So a little bit about my background, my college experience, and the clicker's not working. So let me get some help with that. Hello?
Are they up there?
I don't know if there's anything I need to do there, but we're waiting for it to come up. I hate to do this without the images, but we'll see if we can get it going here in a second. So, some of my background with my college experience is that one, I had never really heard the word college until I was in 10th grade. And so the experience and opportunities that you have here in Bellevue is very different from the experiences that I had. When I heard about that, it was actually through the Armed Services Aptitude Test. It was a test that they had us take in high school to kind of determine kind of interest in terms of careers. At that time, there was some direction and guidance for me to go into auto mechanics, but at the time I knew that I was taking auto mechanics and small engines at the time, but I really had no interest. When I further learned about college, it really was from my sister, so that's something I want to share a little bit more about. But when I had the opportunity to go to college, I didn't go to college until I was 21, so I had a late start. I'm really glad that I waited, because personally I had struggled in high school, and I have a much longer story around just what my struggles were. I was a student that you know, was successful in a lot of ways, but I also struggled in a lot of ways from a social perspective. And I nearly dropped out of school, so going to college was not something that was on my radar. But when I did go to college when I was 21, I very proudly say that I knew what I wanted to do. I had enough planning and time and enough efforts on my own to really be able to figure that out. And so I went to school in Denver at a school called Metropolitan State College. I just knew I was going to major in elementary education, and so that's what I focused on. Later on, earned my master's degree from the University of Colorado at Denver. And while I was teaching, going to school part-time was really helpful to be able just to really apply what I was learning in the classroom on a daily basis. And I'm going to try this again. Okay, there we go. There's the images. It's always better to tell a story with images. University of Colorado, and then most recently, you know, my doctorate work was at the University of Denver. And my doctorate work was so important for me because it was an opportunity for me to really learn, become more of an expert in the area of education. And I also did it because I dedicated my doctorate work to my mom. My mom was the one when I was in high school who created a very clear boundary and expectation that I was going to finish school. And so I dedicated to her because it was a big accomplishment. And I just feel very proud today to be able to have that underneath my belt, to be able to have that experience. I'm going to shift a little bit and talk to you a little bit about my sister. My sister's a couple years older than me, and she had a totally different experience. I often have told people that my sister would have thrived at Bellevue. She was an AP student. She could read a book in one day that took me 10 days to read. She was pretty much an A student, and she just pushed the system to always be ensuring that she was getting the education that she needed. The funny thing about my sister, and the picture, why I have the picture of the states if they were all in colleges, she first heard about college when she was in 2nd grade. And it was a teacher named Miss Bernier. Miss Bernier told her, "You're going to go to college one day." Unfortunately, because my family had never had anybody who went to college, my sister thought that college was a state, a place where you went to go visit. And so later on, it's a funny story now, but then it wasn't because she had no idea what it was. But my sister was the first one in my entire family to go to college and actually graduate. And I'm talking extended family, cousins, uncles, everybody. So she really was the trendsetter for us. And she ended up going to Colorado State University. And then later on, she did her master's work at the University of California in Santa Barbara. And she also holds her doctorate degree. So there's two of us in our family that have been able to earn that work. And I always jokingly say that my sister started her doctorate work a little bit in front of me. It took her a little bit longer to finish, but we were constantly in this competition to see who was going to actually finish. And she did finish before me, but we're both very proud to be able to have that because it is a demonstration of being able to earn one of the highest levels of education that's possible in education. So I'm going to shift now to talk about our diversity here in Bellevue. So I'm going to just share some of the demographic data. You may be familiar with this demographic data, but I think it's updated and I think it's just important for you to know. So here in Bellevue, we have students from many different backgrounds. Our population, our enrollment size actually broke 20,000 this year. The number has been there before, but we had a little bit of decline previously. We have a large number of students from different backgrounds. We have students who are receiving special education services, our ELLs, and students from other languages. So we are a diverse community. It's one of our strengths. This data is just really amazing to me when you look at this. This represents that we have over 94 languages here in Bellevue. And you can see from this one here, these are our top 15, with English obviously being the number one, and then Spanish, Chinese Mandarin, and you can see the other ones. So again, within our classrooms on a daily basis, we have students from all over the world, and Bellevue is truly a microcosm of the larger world. This is one of my favorite slides, because it also represents, with all those languages that we have students from over 125 countries. How many of you knew that? Raise your hand if you knew that. This is new information. Now you know we have over 125, and that number does change, but that is an amazing amount of diversity that we have, and again, it is our strength, and something that we need to continually build upon. So one of the things that we talked about was just how well our students are prepared, and this is one of the things that really attracted me to Bellevue, is that we've had some just great success here. And so when we look at some of these numbers, they're really impressive. Our graduation rate, 91%. That is almost unheard of in some other districts across the country. In districts that I was working in previously, we were very fortunate we were able to get 70%, 60% of kids. And so having over 90% is incredibly high, and just a great evidence of the work that we do here. We have a number of students that take high-level rigorous courses, 90% of students who take SAT or ACT. So you can see that our students are really being prepared for college here in Bellevue. This is a slide, and this will be available public online because I know it's difficult to read, but this just shows you that from the class of 2017, the number of top local and national colleges our students have gone to. Of course, the University of Washington, we had 817 apply, 332 who are attending, but we have students all the way that have gone to Vanderbilt University. So that really just speaks to the interest and the drive that we have in our district and where our students go. So I do have to tell you, I was a little disappointed because I didn't see the University of Colorado on there, so maybe that'll change in this next class. I did see University of Denver. But when we look at some of our other data, this is our graduation data, and I think it's important because many times when we look at data, we look at what's called aggregate data, which means it's all the numbers grouped together. But when we disaggregate that data and break it down by race and the other ways that we examine it, you can see that not all of our students are at that 90% level. You see our Latino students and our African American Black students, have definitely been increasing over time. But that's some of the work that we have to do because we want to ensure that every student has success and has the same opportunity as every other student. So we have work to do in this area, and it's work that I know many of our schools are doing. It's not just at the high school level, it's at the middle school level, it's at the elementary level. So this just shows that we have work to do. In addition, you can see a majority of our students plan to enroll in college after high school. This is data that's gathered in the spring when we ask students what they think they're going to do. And so you can see that students start to identify that many of them are going to go to four-year college, Some may go off to the military, some of them may take a year off, some of them choose to work. When we actually look at where students end up, you can see we have a little bit of a change that not all the students end up going where they say they're going to go. The average number for our students is 78%, and these are students who choose to enroll in college. This changes when you look at this data, again, when you look at it at race. So again, we have work to do with our students to really think about, one, just going to college, and whether that's a 4-year college, 2-year, or other areas of focus like the military. But we also want to make sure our students are able to go to college and be successful. So that leads us to the conversation around persistence. I don't believe we talk about persistence enough. And again, here in Bellevue, it's unique for us because we have a very high persistence level. But not every student who goes to college finishes college. When I did my dissertation, some of the research that I looked at, we looked at different groups, and for some of our groups that at a national level that go to school, we have some numbers, like for example, Hispanic males, less than 20% of them will actually finish college in 4 years. And that's a real tragedy, because what happens to students when they start college, and if they can't afford it and they're getting loans or they're getting other kinds of support, and they drop out and go and get a job that's not related to one of their interests or something that they're passionate about, they start to accumulate that debt, and it really does become an endless circle for them. So we want to make sure that students go to college, but actually complete college, and we want to make sure that that happens. This data here is basically our students from the different high schools. It shows that 90% of students from the different schools are likely to go to college, and this is the data from freshman year to sophomore year. When we look at it by race, you can see again that we have work to do, and even though our students are going off to college, I still believe that while they're here within our school system, we have a responsibility to help them really think about persistence and to find out the things that are going to help them be successful. Because you can see that we have students who go to school, but by year 2, we have a number of students who are not finishing. And again, we don't want students not finishing. We want them to complete it because we want them to be able to reach their aspirations, to reach their dreams, and we know that education is one of those tools that will help people be able to do that. So that leads me to, how do you help with the persistence? Here in Bellevue, as I said earlier with our work with our counselors, we believe in supporting our students at the academic level, but we also know we have to help our students at the social-emotional level. And that's everything from helping our students get along with each other, to helping to recognize differences and be able to support each other. It's helping them be able to deal with issues that come up on a day-to-day basis. But resiliency is something that we talk about, and I think it's something that we need to spend more time talking about. I like to think about resiliency as I have this picture up here. You think about a plant that's coming up and just how much it takes for a plant to break through, but then also a plant in the wind or a tree in the wind most often will not break. And resiliency is about that. Resiliency is about being able to go through difficult times. It's about being able to go through challenges in life and not giving up or not thinking that you can't accomplish that. And I believe that our students face many challenges. When I was in the first 6 months of my tenure here, I spent time on a listening tour, and I did have the opportunity to spend time with some of our high school students. And one of the things that some of the students talked about was just some of the academic pressure that they felt, that there was just this constant need to continually be pushing, and it was really hard and stressful for them. And so that's an important thing to talk to students about, because how do you help them realize that the challenge that they're facing are challenges they're going to continue to face when you're really trying to get to high levels of achievement. But then also, how do you push through when you're faced with a challenge? If you don't get a good grade, or you don't do the piece of homework assignment the way that you would want, how do you push through that so you can continue to find success? For all the parents and guardians in the room and family members, I'd encourage you to talk to your students about resiliency and talk about the challenges that you may have faced in your life or challenges that you're experiencing now. So I think it's an important conversation. And these are just a few ideas around how you can do that. Think about being aware and managing our emotions and impulses. We're all human beings, and at the basis of our human core, we have our emotions. And I know for me, every once in a while, my emotions may get the best of me, but how do you work through that? How do you talk about, something that goes wrong, you get upset, you get mad at somebody and not take it out on them, feel sad about something, how do you work through that? Those are all important things to talk about, because we all know that we struggle at different times with joy, and other times we have sadness in our lives. So those are important things to remember. healthy relationships, positive point on things, and just having a positive outlet. And then one of the ones I think is real important is this idea around, really being clear around the things that you control and things that you have influence on. Because in reality, we don't control everything that goes on around us in our lives, but there are things that we actually do influence. And so we need to be able to continue to push in those areas that we have influence and be able to find more ways to have success. And those are just important things to do. So these are just some ideas because, again, our students are under a lot of work. They're doing a lot of things now. Some students are feeling pressure. Some students finding success. But we want all of our students to push through to have the wonderful time here in Bellevue schools. When they go off into their careers and go into education, they really do think about how they can push through to make sure and finish some of the goals that they accomplish and make sure that the vision that they have set for themselves are realized. Final thing I'll share with you is one of my favorite quotes. And I share this with you because I just think it's important to always think about that one of my core beliefs is that education is about power. Education is, for me, has always been something that's helped me achieve something that I never thought I could achieve before. This quote is from a Buddhist philosopher, educator, Daisaku Ikeda, and basically reads, "The proud mission of those who have been able to receive education must be to serve, in seen and unseen ways, the lives of those who have not had this opportunity. At times, education may become a matter of titles and degrees, and the status and authority these confer. I am convinced, however, that education should be a vehicle to develop in one's character, the noble spirit to embrace and augment the lives of others." So education is about empowering yourself, but education to me is also about making a difference in the world. And so students, as you go off into your careers and finish up here in the Bellevue schools, I think this is an important piece to think about, and especially when you go off and get more education, and think about what difference are you going to make in the world? Are you going to have some kind of technology breakthrough? Are you going to have some kind of social breakthrough? Are you going to have some kind of financial breakthrough? But as you gain new knowledge and gain new information, just encourage you to think about what you can do to make this world a better place. Because more than now, especially in our times, in our country, and what's going on in the world, we need people to continually step up to make a difference in the world. So I want to just encourage you all to do whatever you can to make this place a better place, because we're here now, and we're going to probably be here for a little bit of time. So thank you all. I hope this was insightful for you, and just really proud to be the superintendent, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Hope the keynote was great. My name is Peg Keogh. I am a college financial planning consultant. And my goal tonight is to educate you guys about this crazy world of financial aid and how it works, and then to help you see where you fit in the puzzle. And I'm going to talk over and over again about planning opportunities in the whole mix. So I want to start with a short video. Since money is always a really serious topic, let's start with a really serious video that kind of will get you in the mood here. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pull this up.
So who's going to do it?
I don't want to do it. No, I'm not doing it. Can Rick do it?
He's just a kid. You can't ask him to do it.
Okay. I will do it. What's more nerve-wracking than getting into college? Opening the financial aid package. Should I do it fast or slow? Fast. No, slow. No, fast. Oh, God, I can't remember the Band-Aid rule. Just open it!
What's it say? What's it say?
I don't know. Is this for 1 year or 4 years? Oh, my God, how can I go to college if I can't even figure out the financial aid ladder? Moving forward, I see tuition.
Yes, they're giving us everything we needed. We're poor!
I told you we were poor enough. I never stopped believing.
You know, if we'd worked a little bit harder, none of this would be possible.
Oh, just love America so much.
So I love that video, and I'm going to unplug the audio now so it doesn't hum for you guys.
Session 1 is now beginning.
I like that video because it's so typical of how paying for college is portrayed in the media, that you have to be poor, whatever that means, right? Because it's relative, to get any money. And I'm hoping you're going to learn by the end of this that is not the case if you understand how things work. So let's dive in here. These are things that I hear from parents all the time when I'm working with families. They'll tell me, Peg, I've got a 529, I've got the GET program, I'm set, I don't need to do any planning. Saving for college is a wonderful thing. I have a finance background, I've done financial planning, you need to do that. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. Everybody here has got high school kids, keep saving, but now we're starting to talk about how much it's gonna cost and how you're actually gonna put this into place and make it affordable, okay? I don't have an A+ student who's got perfect SATs, what I like to sarcastically call a super kid. We won't get any money. That is absolutely not true. Every spring and winter, I see these award letters come across my desk of 5-figure discounts per year. I have a daughter, I have twins that graduated in 2016. She had 5 in the 500s on her SATs, a 3.6, and she got money. So the money is out there, okay? And then last but not least, I make too much money, I'll never get any aid. That's true for some people, for certain types of aid, but Bill Gates' kids can get other types of financial aid, and we're gonna talk about that. There's 3 kinds of fit, and you wanna think about this as you're guiding your child to build their college list. There's academic, of course. What do you want to study? That's why, after all, they're going to school, right? Then there's personal, size, how far from home, do you want a Greek system, that sort of thing. And then there's financial fit and affordability. And it's so important to look at all 3 of those together, so that the goal is when your child is done developing their list, that you've got a list of mid, stretch, and safety schools that are all those fits, and affordability is one of them. Okay, so this is a buyer's market, and you might be thinking, what are you talking about, Peg? A buyer's market, the prices are going up and up and up. We might not know, but I'll tell you that most expensive schools are now more than $75,000 sticker price, which is crazy, but it truly is a buyer's market. There are a few very selective schools that accept 5% of kids and they fill their seats. But most schools in this country, post May 1, which is when the kids have to send in their deposits in a senior year to say they're coming, they have seats, and they're great schools, but they're still trying to fill their seats. So I want to emphasize, don't be afraid of these high sticker prices that you see. And I'm going to show you an example of an actual student that I worked with several years ago, so the tuition numbers are a little low, but the point is still very valid of proving to you that this is the case. So this is a public school and a private school. The public school is UW, private school is Gonzaga. You look at that cost of attendance that we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. Big difference, right? Almost double. So it would be very logical to say, okay, Johnny, $27,000 a year times 4, that's a lot of money, but we'll try and swing it. But 51, we can't afford that. Well, watch what happens with this student when they get their package from the colleges. This family has an EFC that we're going to talk about in a minute as well of $21,500. At the end of the day, the true cost for this student, which means the total cost minus the free stuff, there's no loans thrown in here, is $27,000 versus $30,000. So that's a really different conversation to be having. It's a $3,000 difference as opposed to almost double. And this happens all the time. So just keep that in mind when you're comparing a state school potentially to a $55,000 or $60,000 school, because your net cost could end up being much closer than you think. So how does this happen? How does this happen? Well, what these schools are doing is they're offering scholarships, and I also say discounts. The reason why I say that is scholarships have a connotation that, again, the super kids get the scholarships, your A+, perfect SAT score kids, and it's not the case. These schools are attracting and enticing the students that they want to come by offering these discounts and basically lowering the price that the parents and the kids are going to be paying. And there is a study done, there's probably been one since 15, 16, and they found that 89% of freshmen were getting money, and the average amount of money was over 50% of tuition and fees. So I'm not talking about a $2,000 aid of a $60,000 bill. I'm talking about some serious money. So as my title said, don't pay full price. You really don't need to be doing that. So how did the colleges come up with these discounts? I have an airplane up here because my son always tells me, Mom, book your tickets Tuesday night because it's cheaper, or Sunday morning, or whatever it happens to be, because the plane tickets are cheaper. And I had a colleague draw an analogy to college pricing. And I thought, that's really not a good analogy, because when your child gets that financial aid package, it's a very strategically put together package. They know all about your finances, they know all about your child's finances, and then they know obviously all about your child. Their test scores, their GPA, their leadership, their volunteer, everything they do and who they are from the application. So when they put this together, it's a calculated package to try and entice that student to come, or in some case, they might be saying, yeah, we'll admit you, but you're not at the top of what we want, so we're not going to give you much money. So it can really vary from school to school if you have a bunch of awards on your dining room table. So keep that in mind, that's what's happening here, and that's why it's so important to understand how they do this, and at different schools where you fit in, and you can try and figure out what's affordable based on that. So when I work with families, I do, this is my graphic that I show them. We're going to touch on college selection, mostly talk about financial aid, and then if I have time, a little bit of tax aid, but really not much at all, and then a little bit of personal resources. So you might be thinking, well, why are we talking about college selection? There's another breakout about that, and that's not my expertise. Well, I'm going to show you, because the colleges, to make it more difficult, they don't all handle financial aid the same way. And it's important for you to understand how the schools deal with this. So I'm going to show you 2 examples in a minute, but it's important to understand that there's 2 types of aid. There's merit aid, so that's test scores, GPA, music, athletics, leadership, whatever it is. Admissions gives that out, the Office of Admissions. You might not have even submitted a financial aid form when your child is getting that. Congratulations, you got the presidential scholarship, whatever it happens to be. That's purely for that side of it. And what's nice about merit aid is most of the time you get it for 4 years as long as the student maintains a certain GPA. So from a parental standpoint, when you're doing your 4-year cash flow, which I recommend you do, you know that $12,000 is coming in every year, okay? to be at least the beginning of your discounts. The second type of aid is need-based aid, the flip side. So obviously you have to have financial need, and we're going to talk about how that's calculated. And it says self-help because work study is another form of need-based aid. So the student gets a job, actually gets a paycheck that they can use for college expenses. So those are the two main types of aid. So let's look at a couple schools so I can make my point about why college selection is so important. So Pomona College, small school, part of a consortium of 5 schools in California, pretty popular around here. So let's look at how they handle financial aid. So first off, the first red box, 100% need is met. So if you have financial needs, say of 30 grand, Pomona's gonna meet all of it. It might be a few loans and the rest you're gonna get money. That's a wonderful thing. Then you look at 100% of freshmen get some sort of aid, and it's 100%, so that's a win-win. Then I look at all the kids on campus, because they're not going to school just freshman year. All the kids on campus have 100% of their need met every year. That's the win-win, ultimate win-win. Most schools can't afford to do this because you need a pretty big endowment to do that, right? Then we look at their average need-based scholarship. Per year, their average is $42,000. That's a lot of money. But if you have a child who has perfect SATs and a 4.0, Pomona is going to give your child 0 merit aid. That's the non-need-based aid. There are several schools in this country that have this policy. The Ivies, Stanford, and Pomona happens to be one of them. So that's a really important thing for you to understand as a parent, because if you realize merit aid is going to be my discount to get a lower net cost for college, Pomona is not a place you're going to get that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. It's a wonderful school. I just toured it in June. But do it with your eyes wide open from an affordability standpoint. So let's look at another school, Seattle U, in our neighborhood, okay? 67% of need met. That's still a decent percentage. 100% of kids get some form of aid. Then you look at all the kids on campus, 11% are getting their full need met. It's not that great, but again, they can't. It's very expensive to do what Pomona does. The average need-based scholarship is almost $22,000 per year. That's nice money. And then the average merit is almost 12. Again, nice money. So this is, you see how from college to college, their profiles can be very different as far as how they give out financial aid. Okay, graduation rates. Most of what you see when you're surfing the web are going to be 6-year rates. So read the fine print and find the 4-year rate. I told my kids, I'm making a 4-year investment in your future, not a 6-year, because it gets very expensive very quickly if they don't finish, even if it's an extra semester. And the merit aid that I was just talking about, almost all the time, that goes away after 4 years. So you've lost that $15,000 presidential scholarship that you're now paying, and you're paying tuition, your child's still on the dole and not working. So very expensive. At my daughter's school, they call them super seniors. They're just 50-year seniors still in school. So that's something to keep in mind, to check out that 4-year graduation rate. Okay, now on to financial aid. So there's all different types of aid, and we are not going to talk about all these. I'm going to touch on student loans because I want you to understand how they work, but there's all different types of aid. So this financial aid world all wraps around this pretty simple equation. Cost of attendance minus expected family contribution. That's how they calculate take the difference between those two, you've got your financial need. So let's talk about those pieces. Cost of attendance. As you would assume, tuition and fees, room and board, books, and then all schools have 1 or 2 line items that include personal expenses and travel. It's been going up every year for decades. It is what it is. It comes out usually in the summer for the next school year, okay? Expected family contribution, and we call it EFC for short. What that is that's the minimum amount that the colleges and universities think that you as a family can pay for 1 year of school. And I say minimum because it doesn't mean that's all you're gonna have to pay. It's the minimum. And most people, when I'm working with them and we do an estimate and it's $50,000 and they're sitting there and they're doing the math in their head and they're dividing by 4 and I know what they're doing, so I say, nope, you're multiplying that by 4. So most parents are shocked at what their EFC comes out to. They can't believe that the colleges actually think that they can afford to pay that much. Okay, but that's what the EFC is, and there's two methodologies that come out of two different financial aid forms that we're going to talk about so that you get a feel for what they're asking for and how they're calculating this EFC. Okay, so what are the biggest drivers, biggest influencers in this? Parental income is the biggest. It's assessed up to 47%. They don't take your gross and multiply it by 47%. They have allowances. They know you're paying federal income tax. You tell them what you're paying. That comes off. They have an income protection allowance. We even have a state tax allowance, which we don't have, but we still get the advantage of having that taken off. But when they get to that net, most of it is assessed at about 47%. So you can see that's going to be a pretty big driver. Then non-retirement assets. And I'll get into a little bit more detail, but anything you have in a retirement account, that's not included, but the non-retirement savings you have is assessed up to 5.64%. There's a small allowance that comes off before they assess that for the FAFSA schools. Kids' income is assessed up to 50%. Not a huge deal because most kids don't have a lot of income, so it's not a problem. On the flip side, if your children have assets in their name, they're assessed up to 25%. So a lot bigger assessment than the parental assets, okay? Pre-retirement or pre-tax retirement contributions. I'm assuming many of you are saving for retirement. Yes, you need to, right? You're probably having money pulled out pre-tax, goes right to Fidelity, right into the stock market, and you're saving for your future. Well, in the financial aid world, the philosophy is, well, mom and dad don't have to save for retirement, so that's wonderful that they are, but we're taking the amount they save, if it's pre-tax, meaning you're not paying tax on it now, and they add it back into your income in the equation. So if you're putting $18,000 in your 401k and you make $100,000, they're going to consider your income $118,000. Did you have a quick question?
Just what's the up to like 50%, up to 47%? What's that percentage? What does that mean?
That's how they do the calculation. It's assessed once they get the net income that they're going to assess. It's around 47%. Some of it is lower, but most of it's at 47%.
How many years of tax return did they look at?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that, but it's 4 different years. Yeah, I'm gonna answer that. And then the last thing here, number of kids in college. Is anybody gonna have more than one child in school at the same time? It's awesome because what happens is your EFC will go down. It could go down up to 50%, but it's 30 to 50%. So that's something you want to plan for because it's when you do your cash flows and you want to understand that and when their kids are picking schools. So 529 plans, because I always get this question. So that means the get, or if you have a 529 plan where you're with T. Rowe Price or Vanguard and you're in the market. As long as the parent is the owner, which is usually how parents set it up, and your child's a beneficiary, then it's a parental asset, which is better. Remember, 5.64 versus 20 or 25%. So that's how 529s work. The FAFSA. So this is the main federal financial aid form. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's free, as the name says. It's probably the only thing in this whole process that's free. And I say that kind of kidding, but I'm not. It really, you get cha-chinged everywhere in this process. So how does the FAFSA work? It's every school in the country requires the FAFSA, and then I'll talk about another form that other schools require. The FAFSA ignores your retirement account. So if you have been a wonderful saver and you have a $500,000 401k at your employer, that will not be part of the calculation. If IRAs, 403bs, anything that's retirement is off limits. They're not going to expect you to tap it, okay? Your primary home equity, so the home you live in, if it's worth $900,000 and you owe the bank $300,000, you have $600,000 of equity. FAFSA isn't going to ask you about the home you live in. If you have other homes, other property, that's on the table, but not the home you live in. If you're a business owner and you family-owned business and you have less than 100 full-time employees, the value of the business is not on the table. And then if you have either non-retirement annuities or cash value life insurance, which if you did, that would ring a bell, those are off the table for the FAFSA form, okay? If you, and these are on the website too.
Oh, okay, great. 'Cause I
Yeah.
was just trying to take a picture of it.
All right, go ahead. So divorce. If you are divorced or separated, the FAFSA only asks about the custodial parent. So this is a huge planning opportunity if you're 50-50 custody, because basically the custodial parent is wherever the child spent the most time, a year look back from when you submit the form. So huge planning opportunity. And I have a bunch of slides that say planning opportunity with big dogs on them to make you realize these are planning opportunities. And I have 3 big dogs, and it's kind of fun to put dogs up there. So there's one of my dogs, huge planning opportunity if you're separated or divorced, okay? So keep that in mind. And on the back of my handout, I have a checklist, and I listed some of this stuff, so if it's applicable to you, you can check it and then go do your research on it after. Every year I have parents tell me, Peg, I don't want to submit the FAFSA, I'm not going to get any money, and I really, really recommend you submit the FAFSA. I'm going to talk in 1 second about student loans. If you want to have those in the picture in any way, you need to fill out the FAFSA. They're federal loans, and this form has to be on file to get that. Things change in your life. If it's there and they see it, that's a good thing. But another biggie is the merit aid, which remember, non-need-based aid, but some schools want that FAFSA on file to award it. It doesn't make sense because it's not a financial award based on need, but there are schools that require it. So I highly recommend that people just submit it. You're not sharing your financial information with a third party. The government's getting it anyways when you file your taxes. So that's the FAFSA. Big planning opportunity to make sure you do that.
Do you file the FAFSA once for all the schools?
I'm coming to that. I'm going to get to that in a couple minutes. Okay, student loans. So when I hear the word student loans, I think they're the student loans. The parents aren't tied into this at all. It's under their social. The loans that I have up here are the only ones that definitely are truly student loans. So they have a subsidized and an unsubsidized version. If you have need, remember that equation, cost of attendance minus EFC equals financial need. That number is not a negative number or zero. You're eligible for subsidized student loans, meaning the government pays that interest until your child graduates. And they start paying it back 6 months after graduation. If they go to grad school, they can defer it. If you don't have financial need, you can get an unsubsidized loan. It's the same loan. It's just the interest begins, just like a regular loan when you take out the loan. The numbers that I have up there are the maximums you can get in subsidized on the far left. So the 35, 45, and the last 2 years, 5,500. So 19,000 over 4 years is the maximum subsidized loans that a student can get. And they'll always throw in an extra 2,000 of unsubsidized. So the total together would be 27. Bill Gates's kid could get a $5,500 unsubsidized loan. He's not going to have financial need, obviously, but any student can get an unsubsidized loan, and some parents do it for different reasons. But again, you got to submit that FAFSA. So when you see in the paper, we're drowning in $130,000 of debt, there's parent loans in there, or there's parents that have co-signed student loans. And so you want to be careful with that because people are having their Social Security garnished because they're paying student loans for grandkids and their kids. So just be careful before you take on too much debt. That's a huge planning opportunity to understand these loans. If your child wants to go to med school, it might make sense to take these loans because the interest rate is much lower than med school loans might be, okay? All right, the second form that's required by some schools, about 300, mostly private schools, is called the CSS profile. And it's administered through College Board, which is the AP, SAT nonprofit. So your kids will have a login. They're very familiar with College Board. There's some key differences with how they calculate the EFC. The first big one is your home equity is on the table. Most schools, are going to look at your home equity. And it's all over the place how much they do. Some have multiples of your adjusted gross income. Some look at all of it, which is a little crazy because no bank is going to let you access 100% of your equity. But you got to realize that when you're doing estimates of your EFC. If you have a business, that's back on the table. If you're divorced or separated, most of these schools will look at the non-custodial parent, which can create very different EFCs between a FAFSA school, a FAFSA-only school, and a school that requires both forms. So what these schools do is they get the CSS profile and they calculate their own proprietary EFC with their own formulas. And if the CSS profile EFC is bigger, they use it in that equation, cost of attendance minus EFC, to get financial need. And they use that financial need number to give out their endowment funds, which is the second biggest source of these discounts and scholarships. So it's really important to understand if they require the CSS profile and how that's going to affect an estimate of your EFC at those schools versus a Gonzaga that only requires the FAFSA. Whitman College in Walla Walla is the only school in Washington that requires the CSS profile. And they happen to not look at primary home equity. It's just their philosophy. They just don't do that. But most of the schools do. So that's the CSS profile. Big planning opportunity. When I look at divorced families, you could have a $70,000, $80,000 difference in EFC. So just keep that in mind if that's applicable to you. Oops. So prior year, and somebody asked me this question. So this is the timeline of how this all works. October 1 of your child's senior year, both of these forms go live. You don't have to fill them out October 1. You have to check with the schools and see what the priority deadlines are. If you're eligible for state need-based aid, you're going to want to do it right away. Or if it's a school that's first come, first serve, which I don't see them very often. But it goes live October 1. Remember, income and assets are the two big things they're asking about. For income, it's prior year, so it's a 2-year look back. So the best way to keep this straight, because it gets confusing, is to think about when your child's going to school. Fall of what? So say it's fall of 2019 if you have a junior. Take that 2019, subtract 2. 2017 is the first year that the FAFSA and CSS profile are going to ask about your income. So you're going to be filling it out, and you'll have filled that year's long past. You filed your tax return, and it's done. That's why it's important to understand this. If anybody here is a freshman or sophomore, you'll now understand this. And during those years where they're asking about income, you don't want to create big gains that you can avoid, because then they're on your tax return, and you have to put them on the financial aid form. Now, assets on the flip side are literally the day you hit submit on your computer. So the way the market's doing this drop, if parents were submitting forms, it's like, see if the market goes down a little bit more, finish out this correction. Your portfolio drops, you're putting less assets. So it's the complete opposite. You have a lot more time for planning for assets. So that's the timing of this whole thing. So October 1 of senior year. And then you will submit the FAFSA every year. The CSS profile differs school to school. Some of them require it, some of them might have an abbreviated form, so it just depends. Last thing I want to talk about, another form of discounts, is WUI, Western Undergraduate Exchange. Basically, we live in one of those gray states, so if there's a school in Montana or Wyoming that your child's interested in, and they fit in the WUI, meaning you got to read the fine print and see if there are only certain majors or certain test scores and GPAs to be eligible. But if you do all that research and they're eligible, and this is an example, Southern Oregon, basically what you're doing is you're paying 150% of in-state instead of the out-of-state, and it's a big savings. It's a big savings. So this is another way that kids take advantage and get discounts, okay? WUI.
You have to apply for the WUI, or
The schools, most of them, it's automatic, but you gotta go to their website. There's a website up there, but I always say go to the school's website for the most up-to-date information on that. Big planning opportunity with WUI, okay? So again, federal government and endowments, that is the biggest source of money, not these outside scholarships. They're very competitive, and they take a lot of effort to apply to. Okay, so tax aid, I took it out today because of the bill that just passed. Some of this stuff is not really applicable. There is one tax credit called the American Opportunity Tax Credit. So you can jot that down. It's a $2,500 credit. There's phase outs for income, just like the IRS always has, but just plant the seed that's there. Not a financial aid thing, but a tax thing. You need $4,000 of qualified expenses, meaning tuition and fees and books, that you are not double dipping and getting another tax advantage like out of a 529, but it's a great credit if you can get it. So lastly, this falls under the personal resources because I get this question. Grandma has a 529 for Johnny. That's great, but you have to be careful how you use that money, because when that money gets pulled out, if grandma pulls out 25,000, gives it to Johnny to pay for tuition, then when in that tax year, say it's this year, when that tax year comes up on the FAFSA and they say, do you have any untaxed income in the student section? That's untaxed income to the student. So that $25,000 help from grandma will shoot up the EFC potentially $12,500. So you've got to strategically use that money. That's another one of those, this untaxed income, that term that you hear in financial aid. You just have to be aware of what those items are, the 401k contributions being another one, okay? Another big planning opportunity to make sure you understand that. So when you're laying out your cash flow, see how I keep encouraging you to do the cash flow? That you might be using grandma's money a little bit later in those 4 years, so that if you're eligible for need-based aid, you're not hurting your eligibility.
Can I ask a question regarding the 529?
Yeah, once I'm almost done, and then I'll grab that. So everybody in here who's not a student, we all want to retire someday, right? So if your retirement looks like, well, sorry, that was my planning opportunity slide. So all those planning opportunities, keep them in mind. So if your retirement looks like this, or this, or this, you don't want to be the subject of all these articles and what you see on the news. So this is one of the biggest investments you're going to make in your life, probably second to your home, or if you have a bunch of kids, it could be even more. So do your due diligence, and you can find a great school. We're so lucky in this country that we have thousands of schools. Understand where the fit is, the academic, personal, and financial fit, so that you're feeling good about the decision, your child's feeling good, you're not leveraging your retirement, and it's a win-win. So I think I have a couple minutes left here. So you had a question about
529. Let's say just hypothetically, I have 100K, and I want to take out whatever 25,000 a year.
Right.
So how do I take it out and use that money, but not have it get dinged on the?
If it's parent money,
Yeah.
there's no
Okay.
issue. It's
Okay.
only if it's somebody who's not asked about on the FAFSA,
Got it.
it's an issue. Parent money, you use it as much as you want.
You are
Okay.
ready
Yeah.
to close session 1. You have 10 minutes to get to session
Okay.
2.
Did you have another quick question?
Good evening, all. Thanks for being here. I'm John Harrison. I'm one of 3 executive directors of schools. Fancy title, but it basically means I oversee and support a third of the schools in the district, and there's 2 other people in my position. And my other main duty as assigned is I also oversee athletics and activities in the district. So busy job. Most of my career though was spent as a high school principal. Most recently I was the principal at Mercer Island High School right next door. And I've been in Bellevue about seven years. And as a high school principal, I spent a lot of time working with people like our guests in front of you from 3 of our fine public institutions in this state. So this is Public Universities session. We are blessed in the state of Washington. We've got very, very fine public universities, starting with Bellevue College in our own backyard, and University of Washington across the lake, and 3 fine state schools represented here tonight in University of Washington, Washington State, and Western Washington. So if our 3 panelists could introduce yourselves, we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Isabel Bethke. I'm an admissions counselor at the University of Washington, Seattle.
Hello, my name is Carmen Garcia. I'm an admissions counselor for Washington State University. It is also my alma mater, so go Cougs.
And my name is Brian Swanson. I'm a senior admissions counselor at Western Washington University and a graduate from Newport. I should say it every
All right, folks, let's see who we have in the audience today. Students who are freshmen or parents of freshmen, hands up. Sophomores, juniors, seniors. No seniors. That's good. That's a good sign. That means they're planning ahead. They got this information. We hope. All right, so format for tonight, they gave us 9 questions, but we agreed at the beginning that it's really important, to the degree that we can, is give you the opportunity to ask your questions. So we're gonna go through 4, maybe 5 of the questions, and they're kind of like the top 4 or 5 questions that you might have about the college admissions process, and then that should give us lots of time, or some time, for your questions, your own personal questions a little bit later. So let's jump right in, and we'll start off with the academic strength of the transcript. We hear that term is used a lot, the strength of the transcript. So what we want the panelists to answer for us is, how important is the strength of the transcript? What are the courses that should be on that transcript? Is there a difference between AP courses versus regular core courses? Are there a number of AP or IB courses that is recommended? How many advanced courses, AP courses or IB courses should I have in my transcript by the time I graduate from my high school? So if each school could kind of answer that, why don't we start with, let's go to the Huskies.
Okay, so at the University of Washington, academic rigor is one of the basic tenets of how we review your application. So we are looking for 3 basic things when we are looking at the academic side. The first is going to be the rigor of the academic curriculum, followed by the grades you received in that curriculum, and then also your test scores. So the rigor of the curriculum, as you can tell, is one of our big things. So we are absolutely looking at that. We are a little bit different than some institutions your students or you might be applying to as well, in that we are looking for rigor of the senior year as well. All of it's going to continue on. So starting in the freshman year, going all the way through the senior year. But we do want you to be taking the most rigorous curriculum available to you, so whatever that may be. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking what is offered at your school, because maybe there's a class that it's not the best fit for you to be taking the highest level. But we are going to absolutely, rigor is very, very important to us, especially in the senior year, because we do not receive grades from your senior year, so we're only looking at the rigor of the curriculum. So it's very important to us.
Carmen at Wazoo.
So I would say that curriculum and GPA plays the biggest role in the admissions decision. We believe that in order to figure out if a student can not only be admitted but eventually graduate from the institution is by looking at the student's transcript. So we do want, like what you'd have said, is we want the student to challenge themselves But we don't want the student to, or we don't prefer the student to take all AP classes. We don't want an overload if that's going to risk the student's GPA. What's most important to us is the GPA. So if you know that science is your strong suit, definitely challenge yourself, take that AP course. But you know, if math isn't what you shine in, then stick to the core classes. And we want to make sure that the student is taking the CATERS requirements, so the core classes, which is math, English, science, foreign language, and art.
Yeah, I would echo what the other two counselors have said. With Western as well, we are looking for that balanced schedule. We want to make sure that students are taking rigorous classes, but also being very successful in those classes and showing us that self-awareness. If you don't do so well, like your sophomore year in AP World History, for example, but you are that strong science student or something, then maybe you switch out and switch into a different AP class or IB class that works best for you. There's no formula for how many APs and IBs or Running Start classes you put into the equation to get you into any of our schools, but if you're challenging yourself and you're self-aware of that, and you show us so that we're aware of it, then that's going to look really good for you on your application.
Yeah. And that strength of the transcript, I mean, there's all kinds of college admissions counselors of across the country. There's these surveys and data, and the strength of the transcript is like the #1 consistent across the country. And that strength of the transcript, I kind of describe it as balance. You're fortunate in the state of Washington because our graduation requirements are aligned with the CATERS, and in the Bellevue School District, our curriculum is designed to have you college ready by virtue of graduating from the Bellevue School District. And in addition, you are taking advanced level courses as early as freshman year with human geography. So we've set you up to get that rigor, through your program. It's the challenge though. If you challenge yourself by taking, by taking lots of advanced placement courses, but you challenge yourself to the point where you sacrifice your grade, that's maybe a risk that you might not want to take. So what I always say is, take courses that speak to your passion and your interest, because what we know is that students tend to do better in courses that they're interested in. Okay, does that make sense? All right, next question is around essay questions. So the first part of this question is, does your institution require an essay? And if so, what are you looking for? How are the essays used? Do you have supplemental questions? And how important are short answer questions if you ask short answer questions in the application process? So if you could just, each school talk about the role of the college essay in your process. Why don't we start with Western?
Yeah, so at Western we require an admissions essay of about 500 words on average. There's no minimum or maximum for the application essay, but students are going to end up around 500 words. There are 3 prompts students can write on, and the first 2 prompts we set up to ask you either about an experience that's helped prepare you for college, or multicultural or leadership involvement that you've been doing that would help contribute to our campus. And so really the big takeaway here is us asking you to delve into something that might be outside of your transcript and test scores, so that we can learn a little bit more about you and break down that barrier between a counselor like myself and your student, and so we can get to know you a little bit more. So that essay is really important because we have a holistic review process on our campus where we're looking at transcripts, test scores, extracurriculars, and your essay. So all of those things tie in pretty well. We also offer our third prompt, which is just to write about whatever you would like. That's a really great place to send us in an essay from another school. If you already wrote a really killer essay for a different school, I recommend that you change the name of the school on the essay and then send it our way. And then you're good to go. We also offer an optional essay, our Tell Us More section, which you can write on top of your admissions essay. Talk about anything in your transcript, your test scores, or your general life that you'd like the admissions committee to know, so that we can take that into account when we advocate for your admission.
Thanks. Why don't we go to UW and we'll conclude with the Cougars.
Yeah, so at the UW we do have 2 required essays. The first is 500 words. We do have a limit on that, so it's a 500 word maximum essay. We follow the Coalition application at the University of Washington. We just transitioned to this app, so parents in the room who had students who applied before this year, it's a different application. It's a national platform, so you're able to apply to multiple institutions through this platform. The Coalition has its own prompts that we are following, so they use 5 prompts, 4 of which are going to be describing a little bit about yourself. They're all personal statements, and they're asking you questions to prompt you to write something personal. And then the 5th is just an integration essay that says write about anything you want. So you could write something from maybe your Common App essay, or if you're writing for another institution and you want to adapt it for us, you can do that 5th topic. We don't care what topic that you choose, and we don't ask you to write that out at the beginning. We hope that by writing the essay, you'll answer the question and we'll know which question you're answering through that. So that's our required essay of a personal statement. We do also have a diversity statement that we ask for. It's about 300 words, 250 to 300 words. That essay is going to ask a couple of different things, but really we're both looking for something that might bring diversity to our campus through your own experiences, or perhaps how you think that UW might make you a better person, or maybe make you have more diverse goals, something like that. So it's a really broad essay, both of them are. The one note that I do like to mention to every single student who comes up and asks me what to write about is to think of the word impact when you are writing your application essay, for us and for everywhere. So telling us a story is great, but telling us a story that leads us to see who you are is better. So if we just hear, I get a lot of essays about sports injuries, and I'll hear a lot about that sports injury, and I learn so much about the meniscus, just so much. I just never knew I needed to know that much about this part of your body. But I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about the doctors that brought you back to health, and the coach that made you feel like you were part of the team, even though you were sitting on the bench. Like, I'm reciting this from memory because that's how common it is. But I don't learn anything about you. So if I don't learn anything about you, if I don't hear about the impact of that situation on you, that's maybe not the most successful essay. So we're looking for those things. We do also have very similar supplementary essays, so if there's anything you'd like to clarify from your application, please do so in that section.
All right, so at Washington State, we do not require an essay. In order to consider the application complete and ready for review is to submit the online application, submit official transcripts, and official test scores. After we receive the student's application and we feel that maybe it doesn't tell us enough, then we may ask for an essay, a supplemental essay, and that supplemental essay will usually ask the student to just speak on their grade trends, speak about their academic experience, and if there's a dip of any sort or a grade trend, to explain that and to explain what it is that they're doing now, their senior year, to prepare themselves for academic success at a university.
So the commonality is like authenticity of voice, and what I mean by that is they want to know who you are as a person. What are you going to bring and contribute to the campus that you're applying to, and maybe how that campus is going to contribute to who you want to become. As a high school principal, I reviewed and edited numerous college essays, and trust me when I say, and these guys will agree, when it's manufactured, it's evident. So, the kid that, did the mission trip over spring break so that they would have an experience to write about, it's clear when you read those essays, right? So they're really looking for who you are and who you want to become, and impact, I think, is the word that you use. So I like that. That's good advice. All right. Next question, SAT, ACT scores. This is probably, if not the top question, it's right up there. So how do your institutions consider, do you require the submission of an admissions test score? And what value do you place on the scores, and how does that work in each of your schools' process? And why don't we start with the home of the Cougars?
All right, so with Washington State, we do, it is part of the application, and we definitely place more weight on the student's GPA and curriculum. The average SAT score for WSU is about 1,100, and the average ACT is 24. We do super score, so that means if the student has taken the test more than once, we will take the best score from both tests and just make it the student's official score for us. I used to be a college and career counselor last year at a high school, and I'm an admissions counselor. So one thing I can say is that I do recommend that the student take both tests and then see which one they prefer, and then take the one that they prefer again, just because you may score better. And then, so for the juniors out there, I also just recommend maybe take it in the spring this year, and then take it again in the fall for your senior year. But as far as the importance of it, it does play a role, but we definitely place more weight on our the student's GPA and curriculum. We don't play the test score to the student's disadvantage. It's always to the student's advantage. So maybe if they're not the best test taker, it's totally understandable. Not everyone is. We will always look back to the student's GPA and curriculum.
You done?
So we are very similar. We are looking at the test scores to either support, or maybe they're supporting what's already shown to us in the rigor and the GPA, or maybe they're an outlier and it's kind of looking a little weird to us. That's okay too. It is one of our big three things that we're looking for. So that is the rigor of the coursework, the GPA, and the test scores. But those first two are definitely going to be weighted more heavily. And with our test scores, our middle 50% for our SAT is between a 1210 and a 1390. And for the ACT, it's between a 27 and a 32. I would echo taking the test multiple times. I will tell you that both of these exams are structured for United States educations at the end of the junior year. So if you're taking it, in February of the junior year and you're still in, maybe you're in pre-calculus or you're in algebra 2, you might not quite be at that math level that test is built for. So if you take the exam and you don't do quite as well the first time, don't be discouraged. Take it another time. Maybe take a practice test in between. Your curriculum, and especially here in the Bellevue School District, is built to support those tests in some ways. So, and more so, the test has adapted to become more like the curriculum. So definitely, I would recommend taking it in the spring and in the fall.
And I hate to kind of brag, but I'm going to anyway. Tell these folks, when do we do Algebra 2 in the Bellevue School District? Hear that? Sophomore year, we're on top of it.
That is not universal, just so you know that.
Did we cover everyone? No, we didn't. Brian, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah. I don't have a ton to add other than everything that they said is exactly how we operate at Western as well. The SAT and ACT are helpful tools for us in the admissions process, but at the end of the day, it's a holistic review, and so the test scores aren't going to be the only factor that we look at when we're making our admission decisions. Our middle 50% of test score or SAT scores at Western are between an 1100 to a 1200, and the middle 50% of ACT are between a 23 and a 27.
So, and one of the interesting things, another thing in the Bellevue School District, we expose you with, Super Wednesday with these experience in writing these admissions tests. The other thing I'd say is that the admissions tests have got much better. Now they're much more aligned to the content students experience in school. Before the advent of Common Core, it was kind of a guessing game, but now they're much more closely aligned. And it is interesting that for a long time, like ACT was what all the East Coast schools look for, and SAT was kind of West Coast. Now more and more, it's either or is pretty common, or both. All right, last question, then we'll turn it over to you folks for your own questions. Letters of recommendation. This is an interesting one. So first question is, does your institution require letters of recommendation? And if you do, should they be written by an academic teacher, or or maybe a music teacher or PE teacher that knows you better? And what are you kind of looking for if you require letters of rec? And we'll start with Brian.
Sure. Yeah, Western does not require letters of recommendation. If you already have them written for you for other schools, you're welcome to send them our way, but they don't play a big role in the admissions process. I highly encourage you to get those letters of recommendation from teachers, or at least like a boss or something like that, because they are going to speak about you the most. And make sure you ask for letters of recommendation from teachers that have something very good to say about you. Once in a while, someone just asks any old teacher for a letter of recommendation, and then it's not really a recommendation.
And all I can say is when I went to Western Washington High School, I'm sure glad they didn't ask for letters of recommendation from teachers. Just saying. Carmen.
All right. At Washington State, we also do not require teacher recommendations. But if the student is to submit one, or if we ask for more information and may ask for a teacher recommendation, we prefer that it be from a core teacher, so a math teacher, an English teacher. We want to hear from a teacher who speaks to the student's academic performance.
At the UW, not only do we not require them, we will not read them. So if you send them to us, we won't read them. So we get a lot, I'm telling you. I get at least 25 in my inbox every day. So please don't ask your teachers for them. We're not going to take them. The other thing is that if there is something that you were going to ask a counselor or a teacher to explain for you, or maybe they were planning on giving some additional information that you had talked about with that person, tell us in our additional section of our application, because that can be a useful way to use that space.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is if you're applying to institutions that do require a letter of rec, keep in mind there's a whole lot of you in your grade, and it's the English and the math and the science and the social studies teachers that get inundated with requests. So ask them early and thank them profusely. It makes a big difference when, I mean, I know teachers who write, 25, 30 in a year. All right, your turn. Questions that you might have, especially from the students in the crowd. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Given that you admit a lot of kids within our state, do you recognize the high school that they come from, or look at that?
Yeah, I'm the territory manager for the east side of King County, so I know the Bellevue-Redmond-Kirkland area very well and the high schools. And so if your question goes more toward are you aware of the amount of rigor that the Bellevue School District has when applying? Most definitely. A lot of us counselors will stick around in the same territory for multiple application cycles. So we get to know the schools very well.
Anything to add from the other? Is that similar?
Pretty similar, and what I would say is that we're here for a reason. We're your admissions counselor. We want to advocate for you and make your application process as smooth as possible. So if whatever it is, you can always contact us, and we're here to help you.
And at the UW, yes, we do recognize it. Of course, we know I'm for this area as well, obviously. So yes, we do know this, but because of our volume of applications, we're not going to penalize a student who's coming from the eastern side of the state versus someone who might be coming from the western side. So it's just something to keep in mind that we're looking at holistic review for everyone throughout the state.
It's not like there's a quotient, so if 100 kids from Newport this year apply for UW, does that make my chances less? And the answer would be no, right? Good question though.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I bet your question's going to be genius. I can tell already. You've written it down and everything.
How does the IB diploma play a role in how you choose the students you want to take for your school?
Good question.
So this just came up actually, we just got this in the last section too, but with the IB diploma, so we view that to be the highest level of rigor that you can achieve. So when we're looking at that rigor of curriculum, if you're taking a full AP curriculum, or you're taking a full IB, or you're doing full running start, we view all of those as the same level of academic rigor. That being said, that's not universal throughout the country. So the IB diploma is pretty much, IB and AP are standard throughout the country. So they're the highest level technically that you can achieve throughout the country. But at our institutions, we're going to all view running start, AP, and IB as the same level of rigor.
And is that the same for Western and Wazoo? So you hear that? AP, IB, running start are all considered equal, and all three institutions, do honor those coursework. Yes, sir. And credit. Yeah, that's the most important part.
Which universities, if any, require all test scores to be sent, like ACT and SAT?
Either one. As many as you
We recommend it. We recommend you send all of them to us.
All of them.
And at Wazoo?
So we do recommend sending all the test scores just so we can super score. If there's one test that that's your highest score for both, then that's fine. But if maybe you took one in the summer and then you took one in the fall, and then your summer has your strongest math, but your fall has your strongest reading, send us both, because that'll make your highest score.
Exactly. Same with us as well. And we also don't require the writing section for the SAT or ACT as well. So
same with us. We don't require either.
You can opt out.
I'm going to go back to the previous question about AB, IB, and running start, because you all said something last session that's really important. All three institutions on their website have their approach in terms of credit and placement with respect to Running Start, AB and IB, AP and IB. So check out their websites. Student question, I'll come up to you in a minute. Yes, sir.
For essays and like short answer questions, those types of things, should you focus on like who you are specifically, but then also focus on how you would like position yourself within that college, like where you see yourself in that college?
I think those both have natural progressions for each other. So yeah, definitely talk about yourself. And then I think to make yourself stand out, think forward about the activities you've been involved with now, the things you do now that will contribute to the campus you want to go to. So that could be anything from, I'm a star soccer player and I really want to get involved with the varsity team at one of our schools, or even like, I play a lot of video games and want to get involved in your gaming associations or something. Like all of that works together very well. And so like we have clubs, we have a lot of ways for students to get involved.
Yeah, and that essay is going to be a prompt, so they have prompts to them, so definitely read them and follow them.
The question is about the curriculum rigor. If the kids take the like Cisco and the college level career center courses, but they're not titled as AP, was that considered that rigorous or not?
Did you say Cisco?
Yeah.
Cisco. Yeah, it can definitely be rigorous, but we are primarily looking for those 5 subject classes, right? So the math, the science, the social studies, the English, and the foreign language. You're getting college credit for Cisco probably still, so like that's really helpful too, but the caters, the main classes are going to be the priority.
Yeah, and the other thing we do, in addition to the 3 we've mentioned, we also have university, college and high school courses in all of our high schools. So that's another dual credit opportunity. Yes, sir.
This is a question about direct admit for engineering school. So how does the process and the things look different for that?
Okay, so Direct to College for Engineering. If you're interested in engineering, this is new this year that we have moved to a Direct to College program. If you're interested in any engineering program, you'd want to indicate that program as your first choice. They will then go through a 2-prong process. So they both go through the basic admission. So if I'm over here in the Office of Admissions, as I often am, and I am reading the application, I say, yes, this person's a Husky. And it goes on to a couple different people, and they also say, yes, this person's a Husky. We're a yes. Over here at a similar time, probably, in the office of the engineering team, they're going to be reviewing that same application, and they may say, yes, this person is definitely someone we want in our cohort. If they say that, then you will be admitted as a general engineering student. If you are not admitted as a general engineering student, you could absolutely still be accepted to the general university, but with the expectation that it is going to be much more difficult to get into the engineering school should you choose to come to the UW. So the question I would ask a student who came to me and said, I got into the school and I didn't get into engineering, I wanted to be in engineering. The question I would ask is the goal a UW degree or is the goal an engineering degree?
Yeah, great question and great answer. And that's relatively new.
Brand new, this year, first class.
Yes, sir.
So with someone who may have a very strong GPA, but because English is the second language, may struggle in some of the SAT components, how do you determine that, or what's your considerations in those situations?
Great question.
So with WSU, like I said before, the SAT and ACT does play a role, but we already naturally focus more on their GPA and their curriculum. So if we see that their curriculum is strong, that they have been taking those rigorous courses, that they are challenging themselves, and that's met with a really high GPA, then we'll look to that more than we look to their test scores.
Same thing at Western. There's also a lot of opportunities, I think, through all of our applications to self-advocate and just straight up tell us that.
I'm glad you said that. That right there that's the key.
I've heard that from the discussion tonight. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Abandon humility for the college application process.
Yeah.
So the rigor is there, the GPA is there, the test scores are there. Is there any advantage to having a parent that has graduated from one of your universities?
No.
I wish. How about the amount of athletic gear they already have?
you know, that,
Thank you
yeah,
for the
that
donation.
legacy,
Right.
that is becoming a kind of an archaic thing. I mean, it still exists, but not much these days, which is it's a good
This
thing.
now concludes.
Before you go,
session
wait.
two.
Would you please help me in thanking our presenters?
The bell is going to ring in about 2 minutes. I'm Eva Collins. I am the Deputy Superintendent in Bellevue School District, and welcome to College Night. This is our last session of the night, and you are in admission process at very selected liberal arts colleges and universities. And so we're really pleased to have 3 of those colleges and universities represented here tonight, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And then I will ask a warm-up question, and then we will open it up for all of you to ask some questions.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Andrea Frangi. I am a regional director for the George Washington University, which is located in the other Washington, DC. We are masquerading as a liberal arts college tonight, but we're actually a medium-sized private research institution. We are a residential university, which I think surprises folks. What that means is that we require housing for our students for 3 years. So we definitely are an urban university that has a really strong campus community feel. We are located right in the heart of DC. For those of you who maybe haven't been, we are 3 blocks away from the White House. We are across the street from the State Department, which is why we do not have nuclear engineering.
It is time to begin our final session.
Right on. Hello, Hoffa Day. My name is Esther Weathers. I'm an associate director at Whitman College. I reside in Seattle and work with students primarily in Western Washington, Hawaii, and Canada. While I live in Seattle, you may know that my school is located in the town so nice they named it twice, Walla Walla. And we are a traditional private liberal arts institution, and what I mean by that is we are only an undergraduate institution. So 100% of our resources go right back to our students. We do not offer any graduate programs. We believe in a small, intimate learning experience, so about 1,500 student body size, and we are not looking to grow that number. That is the perfect size for us. Fun fact about us, we are a Division III institution. However, we play Division I Ultimate Frisbee, and I think that does a wonderful job in highlighting who we are, the types of students that we draw.
Evening, everyone. My name is Michael Sass. I'm Assistant Director of Admission at Gonzaga University, and like the other 2 panelists up here with me, I work with students from the Bellevue area, predominantly Western Washington and a few other regions. But Gonzaga University is a medium-sized, small to medium-sized liberal arts university. We're just over 5,000 undergraduate students. We do have graduate programs. We do have more technical fields like nursing and engineering, but we do have that strong liberal arts core and foundation, that holistic development of the person both in the classroom and out of the classroom, core requirements in areas like philosophy, English, religious studies, global engagement, really looking to develop that whole person as a key part of the student experience. At Gonzaga, we are one of 28 Jesuit colleges and universities, so if you have heard of the Jesuits, you know a little something about us. If you haven't, don't worry, you're probably not the only one in the room, probably not the only one in my, no, I'm just kidding. Hopefully people that I work with know what a Jesuit school is. But the Jesuits are an order of Catholic priests that are focused on the development of the whole person. They've been involved in education for over 450 years, and in the US they run schools like Seattle University, Santa Clara, Loyola Marymount, University of San Francisco here on the West Coast, or schools like Georgetown, just down the street from George Washington, or Marquette, or Creighton. So it's a university system, or if you will, a set of colleges in the US that all are focused around that development of the whole person, the development of social justice thinking, and communication skills as well.
Thank you.
Okay, in our other 2 sessions, there were questions about the SAT and the ACT and how important are those scores and those tests in the admission process. So we'll just get that one over with right out of the gate.
I feel better starting every time. So in terms of the SAT and ACT, that and rigor of curriculum are probably the 2 first questions I get from most students, right? And probably for a lot of you sitting here, those are the first 2 things you think of when you think of the admission process, are what classes should I be taking, and what test do I need, or what test score do I need? When it comes to those factors, when it comes to all of those factors together, at least for the 3 of us, we do holistic review in our admission processes. That means that it's not just one factor, it's not just the academic factors, but it's that whole person we're looking at in our review process for admission. So the way that we all like to think of it is kind of that picture or that puzzle that is you as a student or as your student. And it's not like one piece, whether it's the test score or the curriculum or the essay or the recommendation letter, is going to be the entire picture, right? You need each of those pieces, whether it's a person's face and you've got the eye or their hair or this part that's in the background, it's all a part of that greater picture. And we want to see that greater picture. We want to see the student, we want to see the context they come from, we want to get to know them, and so it's all a balance of those different factors. When it comes to the test scores, at Gonzaga we do still require the SAT or ACT because we found that no one factor in the admission process is a good indicator on its own of preparation for college and success in that first year. It's a blend of different factors together, so we use a test score as a part of that, especially as a standardizing factor when we get over 8,000 applications from across the country. So it allows us to see one factor that's consistent of all students when curriculums may be different, involvement opportunities may be different, grading scales may be different. Some schools will wait, other schools have a 7.0 grading scale. It gives us one factor that's consistent across the board. But for us, we use it as one of those pieces, and we use it more heavily in fields where there is testing involved in the profession. If you're going into law school and you have to pass that LSAT, you're going to have to take a test later in life. If you're going into nursing and you have to pass the NCLEX to be certified to be a nurse, you're going to have to do more testing later in life. And so we'll use that test as a part of the process more than we would for a student who's going into communication or political science or marketing, where they're not having to pass a test to be certified to do that field. So for us, it's a part of the process. It's not the end all be all. It's one of many factors that we're looking at in balance and in context of the whole student.
For both Esther and I think it's also important to talk about test optional institutions because both of our institutions are test optional. And there is a growing number of schools in this country that are going in that direction. So what does it mean to apply to an institution test optional? Most institutions on their website, you will be able to find what is their published middle 50% for both their GPA and then in most cases their SAT or ACT scores as well. And that is information that you'll be able to find for most test optional institutions as well, because we will still have students who submit tests. And actually GW went test optional about a year ago, and after students had been admitted, had confirmed that they were going to come, we asked them to submit their test scores so that we could gauge institutionally, where it would have no bearing on their admission or their scholarship, what had happened with our test scores since going test optional. Did our scores go up? Did they go down? And what was interesting to see is that they stayed relatively the same and actually were a little bit higher than the previous year. That having been said, when you're looking at a school that might be test optional and trying to determine whether or not you're going to submit your scores, taking a look at that middle 50%, knowing that 25% of students that were admitted had above that and 25% of students that were admitted had below that is a good kind of start for whether or not you want to submit those scores. If you are within that middle 50% or on the high end and you feel like your SAT or ACT scores are very representative of who you are as an academic, then you might want to go ahead and submit those test scores. You also want to be aware when applying to institutions that are test optional that they may have some specific programs that will require that you submit a test regardless of the test optional option. That's a lot of options. At GW, we have a couple of instances where students do need to submit test scores and don't have the option of applying test optional.
Do you have any questions for our panelists?
Is there a compiled list of schools that are test optional?
Mm-hmm. There is. So yeah, is there a compiled list of schools that are test optional?
Online.
Yeah, so I think it's called fairtest.org, I think is the website. Yes.
Yep.
Fairtest.org.
F-A-I-R.
And there are a lot of awesome institutions to consider that you probably never knew were test optional. For example, another wonderful liberal arts college, Bowdoin, is also test optional. They have been ever since. So again, I think sometimes when we think about test optional, there is this assumption that the caliber of an institution is not strong, and that is absolutely not the case. They are very strong institutions. We just decided that for equity's sake and access and inclusion, why not give you the freedom of choice? That's what life is about.
Nice. Yes.
I have a question. Do you have some kind of beauty mentorship program? Like you said, in GW, for example, is residents. Do you have some professors to stay with the residents or engage with these things?
So the question is about professors or maybe staff members and mentors on campus that are living in the residential environment. Is that correct? Okay. So at GW we do not quite every floor because we have so many students living on campus, but most of our floors and every residential building will have faculty and or staff that are living there that are available for students, in many cases that are putting together programming. And then there are also residential assistants, which are generally your upper class students, so juniors and seniors in many cases, who are living on residence floors, who are there to help facilitate the newer students moving in experience. And putting together excursions, like at GW, that might be, a night at the monuments or something like that. And so they'll put together like movie nights, field trips, food things, everybody likes free food, to really sort of create that community experience for students. Yes?
Could you speak to AP and how important AP is in for the applicant? In terms of admissions?
Sure, I've been feeling the kind of curriculum question all night, and I think it's an important one because as the keynote speaker talked about, offering AP classes to students is a really important part of the process, right? Making sure it's the option is there for students to take a rigorous curriculum in their chosen area of study. Now, taking every single possible AP class or taking a full IB diploma may be great for some students, but it may not be great for others. So as I talked about at the beginning, we're looking at that whole picture. We're looking at that balance of who you are in a holistic admission process. And so that means no single factor is everything and no other factor is ignored. So the curriculum, finding that rigorous curriculum and that challenging curriculum is important, but it's going to depend on the student for what that looks like. So for a student who's looking at going into a field like nursing, a rigorous curriculum may be choosing to take 2 years of science at the same time so they graduate with 5 years of science because that's a passion of theirs. They want to go into nursing, they want to study the sciences. Another student, their passion may lie in engineering, and so they're going to be on track for an AP Calculus, maybe even AP Calculus BC or differential equations. That's more their forte, but I don't expect the student whose passion or forte is literature to also be in that AP Calculus BC class. Because we want to see students choosing to engage and challenge themselves in areas that are interest for them. That doesn't mean you don't take math if you're not interested in going into engineering, but it means you probably aren't in that highest level of math, just like you may not be in that highest level of music or art if that's not a passion. So finding that balance, finding that challenging, rigorous curriculum, but also not trying to take every single AP or IB or college and high school class because that's what I have to do to get into college, right? Well, that's not what it's really like. At Gonzaga, every single year, we'll admit students who've taken everywhere from the full IB Washington State Gifted program where they have their IB diploma by the end of junior year, to students who have taken 0 AP and IB classes in high school. There's a whole range of students in between those as well, but it's about choosing a rigorous curriculum that you're going to be successful at, not only successful in the classroom, but successful as a human being as well. Successful pursuing those other interests outside of the classroom and being a well-rounded person. Successful and healthy sleeping more than 2-3 hours a night, where it's not like, okay, I'm taking 6 AP classes, then I've got my sport, and then my job, and I get home at 9 o'clock at night, and I eat dinner, and then I'm up until 3 in the morning doing homework every night, and then I sleep for 4 hours and repeat the next day, right? That's not going to be a healthy lifestyle, and at some point, that's going to catch up with you. It sometimes happens in college, it sometimes happens in high school, but the study habits and skills and experiences and perspectives students are developing in high school, they're going to bring with them to college. And so we want to see students choosing to challenge themselves and stretch, but not to the point where they're breaking, not to the point where they're not, understanding and respecting the fact that coffee is not a food group and you have to sleep to actually be able to focus in the classroom. We want to see students who are choosing to engage in a healthy lifestyle and challenge themselves in balance, not necessarily one or the other.
Other questions?
So when asking about athletics, are you talking about playing sports in high school, being a recruited athlete, both? I think you'll find this at pretty much every college, or hopefully every college. Recruited athletes are going to be students in the classroom too. So they don't have different academic standards where everything gets thrown out the window because they can play basketball or football. At Gonzaga, yeah, we have a pretty successful basketball team, but you know what? Our student athletes are in the classroom probably more than their peers who aren't student athletes and getting additional support. So we want to make sure they are prepared to be successful in those classes as well. We want to make sure that our student athletes are just as prepared. So it's a part of the process where the coaches will be talking you through that, but also the coaches don't make the admission decisions. Just like I don't get to go out and choose who's going to be recruited and offered a scholarship for our soccer team, the coaches don't get to tell me who I'm admitting to the university. So it's a give and take where when they go out, they know who we're looking for, they know what that process looks like, but also they get the chance to say, hey, this is a student we're recruiting or looking at, but that doesn't make the decision.
Yes.
Do any of your colleges offer merit-based scholarship?
Yes, we do. So merit-based aid is different at different institutions, but typically merit-based aid is awarded on the parameters of your GPA, your testing, should they be an institution that requires testing, a little bit about community involvement. Some institutions have a minimum GPA where they'll say, okay, at this point we'll give you merit-based aid. Merit-based aid does not take into consideration, are you applying for financial aid or not? Typically it is a very separate process, but it is heavily academic based because that is exactly what it is, right? It's a metric that you can measure, that you can look at. So for us, everybody is technically in consideration for merit-based aid, but we only award it to about the top 25% of our applicant pool. So if you are looking at institutions that do offer merit-based aid, sometimes the question for you is, where do you fall within their academic profile? That sometimes helps you determine whether or not you would be in the ballpark for a merit-based award.
So how about the amount of the award? Is it
It depends on the institution. So some people give it on a range, some people just give one amount. I've seen institutions where they
have like different levels.
It depends on the institution, yes.
And typically, universities will have it outlined on their website exactly what, I mean, maybe not exactly, but what the parameters are, what the amounts are of their merit-based aids.
So is it quite true that most of the liberal arts colleges, they do have merit-based?
It depends.
Yeah, so this is a good opportunity to remember to do your research, right? If merit-based aid is going to be a big part in your decision-making process as a family, right? Because maybe you don't qualify for need-based aid, then absolutely, that is a fair question to ask every institution. It is outlined on their websites pretty clearly, as Andrea mentioned, but again, it goes back to you doing your part and doing the research.
And I think a good way to approach that research is by kind of creating a list. When you, as a student, or you as a parent or guardian, are sitting down together and starting the conversation, having a very real conversation about what is important, geographically, size, major, cost, money availability, scholarship, financial aid, all of those kinds of things, and just kind of creating a list. And that can be a really, I think, realistic and easy way of breaking down what can be a super overwhelming process into smaller chunks. Like, I have this area that I'm interested in studying, and it might be English, but not necessarily every school's great at that. So I'm going to start doing some research, and I'm going to eliminate all the schools that aren't. And then I'm going to think about geography. I only want to be on a coast that has easy proximity to a mountain. Okay, well that's going to eliminate a lot of institutions. And then money is going to be important to me. So I'm gonna start looking at websites, checking out the net price calculators to figure out what the cost is going to be potentially, and I'm gonna look at what merit awards are. So that's all part of this kind of homework that needs to be done, or this like maybe first ever research project that you're not gonna get a grade on, but that will help shape your life forever, that you're going to be tackling as a student, and that you're going to be helping to support as a parent or guardian.
Let her do it. I already did once.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Do you weight the freshman's GPA as heavy as other 3 years, or do you wait less, heavier for the freshman's GPA?
I mean, it's not one factor being more important than the other, but we're looking at the picture, we're looking at the journey, we're looking at what is happening around it. Because when it comes to being a student in a classroom and the GPA, there are a lot of things that will affect that, right? Maybe you got a concussion playing sports and you had to miss a month and a half, 2 months of school, and your grades really dipped for a semester. Or maybe you as a student were a late bloomer and your first year of high school, you weren't even thinking about college because you were 14 and just trying to adjust to this new place that you were at, right? And then sophomore year, you got a rhythm, you're going, and then junior year, you're doing much better. We're looking at all of those factors when it comes to the admission process. We're looking at kind of the picture. So it's not one is more important than the other. More commonly, yes, the junior year is going to be a more important year because it shows us who you are more now than who you as a student were when you were 14 or 15 years old. But that's not to say that if the junior year is lower, it's going to be the end of everything, because there are a lot of reasons that could have happened. Maybe the grades dipped a little bit because the student is now working 40 hours a week because mom or dad lost their job and the student's saving to help contribute to college. Those are things that we're looking at. We want to see that bigger picture. We want to know why these things are happening. And so share those pieces with the colleges, because we only know what the student is telling us through the application process, through emails, through conversations. We only know what they share with us. And so if we see a dip along the way and the student doesn't tell us what's going on, we're going to have to try to figure it out or assume something about it or say, oh, well, the student didn't care enough to try to tell us this information. But if they say, hey, my grades dipped because this happened, my grandma who lives with our family passed away, and it was a really tough emotional process for us, I had to actually miss some school, those are things we'll look at. We'll look at the context of what's happening. So when it comes to first year versus junior year, again, context and journey, more recent grades are going to carry a little bit more heavy bearing, but it's not to say that they're the end of the be all.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of what we talked about as doing your research, right? So there are lots of institutions that offer interviews, and I think an interview is a wonderful time to have that dialogue, because oftentimes when I meet a student, I'll try to take a glance at their file if it's complete, so I can get a sense of how they're doing, where they're at, and if I need to ask a more pointed question, then I have that capability. But let's say I don't have your application yet and you have those dips. Why not talk about it when we're face to face? I think that's a wonderful opportunity. That's not to say that you have to interview. That's not to say that that's how you can tell your story. The other way in which you can indicate it is in the additional information section of any application. Any application will have an optional little section that says, tell us if there's anything else you want to share. That's a wonderful opportunity to do so. Now, what I do want to caution against is think about how you're going to craft and explain, right? Andrea said it beautifully. There's a difference between excuse and explain. And so think about how you want to highlight what occurred in that journey in particular. So be thoughtful in the process.
So, my son knows very clear what major he wants to study. My daughter, on the other hand, she loves every subject she's studying. She does not want to commit herself to be a doctor, to be a lawyer. She just wants to embrace all the subjects. How do I select colleges that kind of encourage that, kind of lead to that?
That is the definition of a liberal arts education.
It really is. Because many liberal arts institutions will not require you to declare a major for at least 2 years, and we are very much against it. When I have a student tell me, I want to only do biology, we actually require you, we push you not to declare, and we require you to take other classes than biology. So many liberal arts institutions are about you having that time to explore and find yourself.
And while we are not a liberal arts university, your daughter is not limited by law and medicine. If she comes to GW, we can prepare her for either of those two careers, but she could also do business or English or psychology, and she doesn't necessarily have to know coming in exactly what area she wants to major in, but she would be applying to a college at GW or a school like the business school or science and engineering or our Columbia College of the Arts, which is where you would find psychology, English, Africana studies, things of that nature.
Other questions? Anyone? Yes.
At your 3 schools, are kids guaranteed their major, what they want to go into?
At Gonzaga, so it depends a little bit. If a student is looking at engineering or nursing, those are our only 2 programs that are competitive admission. So outside of that, a student that's admitted to the university is guaranteed to get into their major if they're admitted to the university. Those 2 programs, engineering and nursing, are both direct admit or direct entry programs, meaning that as the student's applying to the university, they're applying to that program at the same time. For us, it's all through the Common App. You probably won't even notice that you're applying to that program, other than you indicated, my major will be mechanical engineering or something in engineering. My major would like to be nursing. In that case, then students will know their decision up front and be guaranteed to be in that program if they're admitted to that program. It's not applying in later, but
Do
outside
they
of
fill
that,
up to then, so if someone decides they want to go that route as like at the
they
end of their sophomore
can't
year, it's
switch
too
in.
late? Yeah.
Yep, especially for nursing, there's no space to switch in, there's no transfer spots available. Engineering, there are, but it's few and far between for students to be able to switch in. So if a student's considering it, I strongly encourage them to apply under that major because they can always switch away from it later. You're not stuck with it if you get admitted, but you just kind of take that option off the table if you don't apply to it.
Yeah, you're guaranteed your major at Whitman. I mean, and at most, if not all liberal arts institutions, because you're not applying to a specific major, you're applying to us as an institution as a whole. So the concept behind that is if everybody wants to do biology that year, we're just gonna have to make it work. But luckily, that is not the case, because I feel like organic chemistry really filters out who wants to do medicine quick. And Grey's Anatomy is not nearly as popular, so it's more about computer science these days with my students. But yes, every major is yours to pick. I have students changing majors every day.
And it's a little different at GW. You're applying to a college, you will be considered for that college. You do not have, or school, interchangeable. You do not have to know what subject or what major within that college necessarily you're going to be pursuing. We do have the vast majority of our students double majoring. Many are also triple majoring. And students are able to change their major once they are at GW within certain schools, but not all.
Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that kids are double majoring. Can you double major between 2 different colleges?
You can. So the question was, can you double major between different colleges at GW or different schools? And you can. It depends a little bit. There are some restrictions. And if you want to grab my business card, I can send you the link that has like the restrictions on there. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love that question. We believe in experiential learning in every form possible. So we have what's called an off-campus studies office. We don't even call it study abroad because there are multiple ways in which you can do so. So we offer international experiences that are semester-based program. We offer domestic experiences that are internship style. So oftentimes my students who want to pursue politics will go do an internship in DC. I also have students do internships in a research lab. So if you're looking for that hands-on career experience, sometimes an off-campus study program really affords you that opportunity. And then we also have a unique program where you camp for an entire semester down the West Coast looking at environmental issues. But again, we have the luxury of being a smaller school, so we really promote and push that. About half of our students will engage in some type of off-campus study experience. And your financial aid, so whatever you would pay for us, also moves with you.
And about half of our students are having an international experience. You also talked about kind of the off-campus experience. There are 15,000 internships available, which is more than we have students. So most of our students are also engaging in an internship experience, at least one, before they graduate.
Same thing for both domestic and study abroad programs. Last year, our graduating class, it was about 55% of them studied abroad before graduation. And when we approach that, we really approach it from a very intentional perspective. If you're studying abroad, we don't want it to just be cool. I went to this beautiful place and I saw history and it was sunny and I loved it. We want it to be a cultural immersion experience. So for the vast majority of our study abroad programs, they are a semester or a full academic year where you are living in that culture and in that community, in many cases taking classes in the native language, really immersing yourself in that experience. Those courses or those programs will range from field research in biology or psychology to a program where we have our own satellite campus to programs where you'd go take classes at the University of Glasgow in biology research, researching with their domestic students that are their students or their other international students. So it's really going to range, but we really, just like all three of our universities, want to make sure that that is an intentional cultural engagement experience and not just a tourism experience where I got to see this cool, awesome place, but you really are becoming a part of that culture because that's an important part of the learning and growth is in the global world that we live in, how do you interact and how do you engage with and how do you learn from different cultures and communities?
So it looks like the time is up, but if you wanted to come and take a business card, you're welcome to do that. And thank you so much for coming to college night.